If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this. For explorers and those who investigate abandoned and rundown places, what is the creepiest paranormal thing you've seen during your explorations? About 4 to 5 months ago, I visited a place called Gold Camp up on Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado. I went with a total of 12 friends, and the plan was to check out the supposedly haunted third tunnel, but as the night moved on, we decided to further explore the area and eventually saw a flashlight out in the distance. We called out to the person or people jokingly, and they yelled back to us. After some time, we said, "Wait, there, we are coming to you." They replied, "Okay." After we arrived at the spot, we saw them. There was no one there, and the person stopped replying to us, calling out to them. The bushes around us started rustling, so one of my buddies made the call to get out of there, claiming it's a setup, and just as we were leaving, the man called out, saying, "I'm coming." My buddy said, "Duck him, we're leaving," and at that point we heard a blood-curdling scream and footsteps sprinting at us. We hightailed it out of the area, running until we hit halfway down the trail, and we stopped, so another one of my friends stopped to fix his boot. Mind you, he is the fat guy in the group, and we were just discussing the situation when we saw him dart past us like a bullet. Most of the group ran as soon as he did, but 3 of us turned and saw him dart past us like a bullet. Most of the group ran as soon as he did, but 3 of us turned to see why, and this thing standing at about 6 feet tall with long arms and large hands with the overall shape of a man was full-fledged sprinting at us, hunched over, and that's when the rest of us ran too. Later that night, I made some calls and talked to a lot of people I trusted about it. One of my friends said it sounded like a Wendigo, and my uncle-in-law had a similar story in the same place, and they described a similar creature to what we saw, and the thief's story made it sound more like a Wendigo, and it was responsible for their friend going missing. Was exploring the woods one night, a black dog kept disappearing and then reappearing in places that were impossible for it to have gotten to. We followed it all night long, and it led us up a hill right as the sun was about to rise. We heard one last mournful howl from the dog, climbed the hill, and found the remains of an abandoned cabin. Beside the cabin was a doghouse with a rope tied to it. At the end of the rope were bones. I don't know if they were dog bones. It's quite possible the owner just fed bones to the dog as a treat, but in my mind, we just spent several hours in pursuit of a friendly ghost dog who ultimately led us to the place where he died. So I'm looking for some answers on this thing. I've seen it once before while imagining, but it happens a lot with a multitude of creatures. But they've never shown up in person, but this one did. So me and my friend decided on Thanksgiving that we wanted to go explore this drainage pipe that goes under the city. It was weird from the beginning because my friend looked in a hole, saying his eyes were looking back at him, but he flashed his light into the tunnel, and there was this thing we both saw. It was standing there, about 6 at a time, maybe 8 or 9, but as we were going through the caves, learning about the person who had discovered it and his friend, and having to crawl through 2-foot openings in their stomachs to finally reach the waterfall, me and my brother thought it was a really smart time to go off and explore. There were things to keep us on the trail in the tunnel, like chicken wire in the cracks that lead off to other places, but I think me and my brother managed to find a loose part and slip through. The wire part may be completely made up, but I remember having to go through something. I should also mention that my brother was 11 and super skinny, so he was able to go through this crack with only a little difficulty. We had been walking through this super narrow hallway-like crack that gradually turned sideways as we went in. It was probably about 10 feet long, but to my 8-year-old brain, it felt like a lot. When we got to the end, my brother froze and told me to go back. He turned around really fast, ushering me out. It was hard since we were crawling diagonally, but I remember smelling a funny smell. It was kind of sweet mixed with the smell of swamp water. It may have just been the cave, but I had looked past him and seen a jacket, like a winter coat-like jacket, and it was blue. We crawled out of the crack and back to the group, and I got a cut on my arm from the rocks. This isn't important, I just remembered it. We ran to the group, and no one had noticed we were missing, as we had been gone only for about 5 or 10 minutes. My parents didn't even notice. It took me a few years to realize that that was a person in that jacket, and that smell was them decomposing. I just asked my brother about this, and he said that he had seen white hair on the person, and it was moving because of a breeze, so most likely it was a homeless person who had either found some way in from outside and gotten stuck or maybe even drowned when it had flooded, but I'm feeling kind of sick realizing this. It's been years since this happened, but my stomach drops every time I think about it. So I was urbexing an abandoned psych hospital near where I live. This specific one is way out in the middle of nowhere near a street light and is a mile or so down the road near a gas station that closes around 10 p.m. This night there was a new moon, and me and my buddy had parked at said gas station and walked to the entrance gates of the property. The property was surrounded by barbed wire topped fences that were pretty tall, so I was sitting out front looking at a map for a way around the fences. Me and my buddy were just sitting there in the dark, and we both perked up at the same time. He hits my chest and says, "Did you hear that?" Now I asked what he meant because I had heard what sounded to be a woman scream from off to our right, and I wanted to see if he had too. He said, "I heard someone whistling from inside the fence." This freaked me out, obviously, so we stood up and started shining the light into the fence to look for the noise. As my friend panned the light, he saw a 7-foot tall or so shadow figure standing there. He grabbed me and said, "Ducking run," so we took off, and I turned around when we rounded the bend into the road. I looked back and saw a figure crouched down outside the fence, and we ran faster. We slowed down, about halfway back to the car, and started to walk. The whole walk back, there were weird noises coming from the woods next to us, and we eventually got back to the street light, very uneasy. As we got to the car side of it, we noticed a weird shadow in the shape of a person. It looked like someone was standing under the street light. It had a hard cut off, like they were in the middle of the intersection. We stared at it for a while, trying to see what was casting it, then I shifted, like whatever was there moved closer to the light source. We booked it in the car, and as we were getting in, I heard a whistle from the woods. We drove back to the intersection, and the shadow was gone. We drove back to the hospital and shined our headlights into where the figure was, and there was nothing there. I have gone back since and never felt right going there. I was a dumb duck as a kid. I did a lot of ridiculous shit, but in this encounter, just let me tell you, I learned my lesson about breaking into places that really should be left alone. It was in the middle of the summer, and me and my friends sat on a wooden fence, smoking cigarettes, thinking about what the hell to do with ourselves. One of my friends suggested an abandoned hospital up the road from my house. We were unsure at first, as we'd heard a lot of stories from people who had previously gone years ago before it was boarded up again. After much discussion, we went. It was boarded up with wood nailed to the windows, and the doors were sealed shut, so there was no way we could have gotten in that way. We were going to walk away and just go home, but luckily I remembered I had something at home that I could get the boards off with. As we climbed through the window, we finally got in. It was like going through a time warp. The place wasn't heavily damaged, and the interior looked like it was from the 1970s or 1960s. There were still stale, bloody towels there too. It was eerie as hell. Anyway, we fooled around and freaked each other out for a few hours until we had to go. Before we left, we fished around with a fire extinguisher that had been left there. While everyone was in the center of the hospital, I stepped out for a breather in the hallway with the window we entered through. I was at the bottom of the hallway, and I saw a pale, slender figure in a blue hospital gown climb out the window while looking at me. He looked tired and sick. I froze and screamed. I left as soon as it appeared. I will never forget how freaky it was. This was back in 2019, around April. Me and my friends had found an abandoned house after wandering around a road for about a mile. The house was a small house, had a little pool, but was pretty nice, though it was clear it had been abandoned for a little while. I originally told my friends we should go in, and they tried chickening out. I told them it'd be fun, plus there weren't people for miles. It'd be hard for us to be caught. It was the only house down that road. I went in first, just to check around with a saw we found in the shed, just in case I'd found someone aggressive. The house was just one floor with an attic. However, I found something weird. I shook it off at first and told my friends it was clear. We all went in together. The house was nice. It had nice wallpaper and nice flooring. It looked to have been built around the late 1970s. I couldn't shake the feeling of that one thing throwing me off. I live in England, so basements aren't a common thing in our houses, plus there was already an attic. There was a low chance there actually was a basement, but there were holes in the floor leading to complete darkness. This was back when I was newer to Urbex, so I had no clue how much danger I was really in. I sat up in the attic, seeing a few toys, which was strange because it was a one-bedroom house and very small. I got down quickly just because there wasn't much up there. I decided to explore a little more while my friends went outside and looked more in the shed. I then found a semi-hidden door and called them in. We hadn't noticed before, and they forced me to go in first, but there was nothing in there, so I just shrugged it off and left the room. When we were all sitting there talking, I heard footsteps, but from below us. They didn't, and I said we had to get out. They just shook me off for being a little pussycat, but I tried leaving, and not too long after, my ankle was grabbed from one of the holes in the floor. My friends panicked and dragged me back up, and we got the hell out of there. Looking back at that, I wonder if anyone has ever fallen for that in the past or after my experience. I can't even begin to imagine what could have happened had my friends not been there to help me or if it had happened to anyone else. I live in a very rural area. There are many abandoned buildings. Sometimes entire towns are abandoned. Though you have to be armed when exploring, abandoned houses are prime estate for meth labs. I've been fortunate to have not crept upon a meth lab yet. Anyway, not sure if this counts, but there is an all but completely abandoned town I explored. The scary part wasn't the buildings. Most of them seemed typical. Gutted, musky, edgy graffiti, the works. The church was a little odd, as it was the only building that seemed untouched despite being vacant the longest. Everything was still where it was left, no graffiti. The cemetery, however, gave me probably the most disturbing experience so far. This cemetery was near the church, with a dirt road running right through the middle of it. The youngest grave was in 1934. The oldest were in the late 1700s. Most of the tombstones were dilapidated. Infant tombstones were missing their lamb figurines, fences were warped, and a lot of them were not even standing anymore or even in their correct places. I remember a couple dozen of the tombstones being uprooted and haphazardly leaning against the trees, which also began to swallow them over time. This place was truly abandoned, generations of people forgotten, with no one left to pay their respects. Remember how I said there was a road in the middle of the cemetery? Well, the cemetery was there before the road. I guess I was too dumb at the time to fully realize that those tombstones against the trees actually belonged to the ones under the road. I was unfortunate enough to find out that none of them were relocated. It had rained a couple days prior to my exploration, so the road was soft. So I go back into the car after checking things out and make my way through the road. Just before leaving the cemetery, the front of my car falls, and I become stuck. Thinking I just hit a wet spot, I go out and see. I didn't like what I saw. Under my tires was an amalgamation of wooden splinters and decomposing fabrics, and I saw a glimpse of bone. I didn't know the sheriff's number, and I needed someone who could pull me out. So even though I didn't want to, I called 911 and told them what I needed and that I fell into an unknown grave. I ended up coming home pretty shaken up about it. Surprisingly, all the car got was a small scuff. By the way, even after that, they still didn't relocate the bodies, not even the one I accidentally struck. They just blocked the road long enough for them to build it up some more. I don't really buy into the paranormal stuff and feel like most of it has an explanation, so I don't really have many stories about that. Other than the time I was exploring a 150-year-old abandoned asylum by myself, the wind was blowing through a vent on the wall and making this really annoying rattling noise. I muttered "stop it" while I was setting up a photo, and the noise immediately stopped and never started up again. Whatever, I was comfortable in the place and never felt like I was in any danger during the many times I visited. Also on the same trip, we explored an abandoned hospital with the ceilings caving in and tons of water damage, and the power was still on. It was a fun time trying to make sure you didn't touch anything that could electrocute you. About 20 minutes from my house, there is a town with only one paved road and then a couple of little dirt roads. If you follow the road all the way to the end, it leads to cliffs with a lighthouse. There is a speed sign along the road with a tiny dot of black spray paint on it. If you walk directly into the bushes for about 300 meters, you will find an old abandoned bomb shelter. My friends and I used to smoke there when we were younger. It's got a spiral staircase that leads down into one big room with two small rooms. It's full of graffiti now, and there's a little fireplace and stuff that's super cool but really creepy. Anyway, one night at about 1 a.m., my friend and I decided to go for a walk down there, as she lived in this town and her parents were asleep, so it was easy for us to sneak out, and we wanted an adventure. As we are walking into the bushes, we can see the bomb shelter in sight, but we can also see a light flickering inside, so we freeze and just watch for a couple of minutes. Then we hear the sound of a group chanting. We want to get a closer look, so we creep a little closer, and as we were doing so, I stood on a branch, and it snapped, literally 1 second after the lights went out and the chanting stopped. We sprinted the whole way home, and it freaks me out thinking about what could have happened as we were two 15-year-old girls at the time. While I do not argue that this story can be explained without anything paranormal, I was and am under the very strong impression that it is not something of this world. The story starts when me and several friends decide to go explore an abandoned mansion. It belonged to one renowned World War II general and was seemingly abandoned in the 1950s, soon after his death. We arrived there at about 6 p.m. The mansion was really huge and surrounded by forest and very tall grass, even on the road to gates and doors. Nobody seemed to visit this place for a really long time. We entered and started to explore the building. It was likely built in the late 1800s. It was really huge, with a whole labyrinth of rooms, ladders, terraces, and corridors. After we entered and passed from the small hall to the first big room, meowing sounded behind us in a room from where we passed. It was a cat. It looks like he's less than 3 to 4 years old, not that big, white with black spots, and looks very healthy. I noticed it immediately, as I have been volunteering for homeless cats for a long time. The cat approached us without any fear. I raised my hand, and he instantly let me pet him. His fur was very soft, clean, and in good condition. Overall, just a perfect cat. Then, during our exploration of this labyrinth-like mansion, the cat was always hanging around us. He had no fear and no particular curiosity towards humans, while readily letting everyone pet him, like a very calm and confident house cat who was never mistreated and got used to being around lots of humans. This was already strange enough for a cat who lived in an abandoned house, likely before his cat grandparents were born. When we finally were done making photos of the abandoned interiors and left the house, I tried to find where's the cat to maybe take him from there, but he disappeared this instant. Half a minute ago, he was running between our legs and meowing, but as soon as we were leaving the house through that small entrance room, he disappeared, and he didn't go out. I looked inside and called him, no traces of our new feline friend. Then we waited a bit, but it started to get dark, so we moved back to cars. It was already very curious, but what made me think about supernatural things in this case is that in the basement, the only part of the house where that cat didn't follow us, we found old remnants of a dead cat. So I found this old, broken down house in the woods close to where I live. I have only lived here for a year, and I was alone, walking around it, trying to see if I could have a look inside. While I was walking around, I felt a bit scared, but I pressed on. I found a way in, but it smelled so much of mold that I didn't go in. Anyway, the point of the story is that, when I was about to leave, I got this feeling of sadness wash over me. So I stopped and turned around and looked at an open window of the house from about 10 meters away, and it felt like a woman stood there, in pain from the state of her house. I stopped and stared, and I was almost about to cry a few times as I walked away a bit, then stopped and looked back again. I almost felt drawn to the house, not wanting to leave. As soon as I got away from the house and was walking back home through the forest, the feeling of sadness left. On a side note, the day before I walked through a part of the forest where a lot of trees had been cut down and a lot of branches and bark were scattered all around, I also felt such sadness, like the trees were crying. As I am writing this, I realize that I sound kind of insane, but I have never really felt this way before, and I feel like normal one day later today. I'm just getting back from a little urban exploring at the abandoned Sladen Farm School in Glen Mills, Pennsylvania. It was a reformatory school for girls from the 1910s until 2001. It consists of several cottages that house the girls, which are huge 3-story buildings with huge basements and attics. There is also a gym, an administration building, a church, garages, and a house. Every building has an entry point somewhere, so everywhere is accessible. This is the 5th time we've gone there, and the 2nd at night with nothing but the flashlight on our phones. This time we decided to try to find the pool that one of our friends mentioned, so we headed in a direction that we hadn't explored before. We found 2 buildings with bathrooms that could have served as changing rooms but couldn't find a pool. We did find a swamp, and that's where the paranormal story begins. My girlfriend claims to have seen a black entity standing out in the swamp. She discredited it, as I would have too, because it was so dark out there, but according to her, it began to follow us as we retraced our steps towards the main road that runs through the property. She says it followed us as we made our way to the church, which is at the other end of the property. For whatever reason, she didn't mention it to us, probably out of fear of either how it would react or how we would. When we got to the church, my friend and his girlfriend had to pee, so my girlfriend and I went in ahead of them as they took care of business outside. The only opening to the church is a set of stairs that either go up to the church or down to the basement. We had been to the basement before, and there wasn't much there besides an old piano and pop drums. As soon as we went up to the rectory area, which would be where the actual front doors are, I heard a distinct ha 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 come from the small room upstairs, which we believe was a bedroom, followed by shuffling and creaking. We both heard the noises and froze before I grabbed her and ran outside, right as my friend and girlfriend were going in. We told them what we heard, and of course we had to investigate it. We went upstairs and checked out the room and found nothing, of course. We stayed up there for a few minutes, just chatting. Until I noticed that my girlfriend kept looking behind me with that pale, I just saw a ghost face. I could tell she was really freaked out and had seen something. She wouldn't answer any of our questions or even respond, but it was obvious that she was shaking. As we went to leave the church, we saw a cop patrolling the area, and for him to be all the way back there, he probably saw my car and was looking for people. So we went back to the church and killed our lights, my friend keeping his in his pocket, giving off just enough light to see in front of you. After a while, we made our way back to the car. It took about an hour for my girlfriend to actually say what she saw. Apparently, this black entity followed us to the church, where it began to get closer and closer. When we were in the upper room of the church, she said it was getting very close to my and my friends' heads. She says that it was a solid black mass and that she could not see through it. She said that it was taller than I am, and I'm 6 feet 5 inches. She said it appeared as a figure, with a head and arms but no distinguishable face. According to her, it would sway from side to side, and there was no point that it wasn't with us since getting to the swamp until we got back to the car. Even though I didn't see it myself, I'm inclined to believe her. She's not the type to make something like this up, especially when she's able to act so freaked out. So, is it possible for a black entity to show itself to only one person out of a group, or did she make it up? I would also like to hear some other black entity stories if anyone would like to share. As a child, I enjoyed exploring places that I was warned not to go into or avoid after dark. They were the cemeteries, abandoned buildings, dark alleys, and the forest. This curiosity all started from hearing a story about the area, such as there are ghosts, monsters, someone was murdered, or people went missing. I wanted to know if such tales were real, and in the end, most weren't, while others had some basis for truth. Most places would have 1 or 2 stories surrounding them, but when a location is just drowning in legends, would you still go at night, say, to the Devil's Gate Dam? The Devil's Gate Dam crosses the Arroyo Seco Canyon in Los Angeles County, California. The structure was built in 1920 to control the floodwater of the Arroyo Seco River. The location is known for its natural rock formation shaped like the devil's head. The dam holds many tales about the paranormal involving demons, ghosts, the occult, and portals to hell. The canyon is believed by local Native Americans to be haunted and hold mystical properties, which their folklore warns people to stay away from as it's a portal to the spirit realm. Accounts from early settlers mention experiencing paranormal activity along with the disappearance of livestock. What made the Devil's Gate Dam truly famous didn't occur until the 1940s. Jack Parsons, a rocket scientist, would be the one to bring stories of demons, portals to hell, and the occult to the canyon. Parson was known to have interests in the occult and was a member of the Ordo Templi Orientis, created by none other than Aleister Crowley. Both men believed the Devil's Gate Dam held great magical powers and was even a portal to hell. Parson was rumored to have performed magical rituals in hopes of opening a doorway to summon a demon into the world. Some had speculated that, before his death, a portal was opened and remains to this day, as paranormal activity continues in the area. Over the decades, strange events have occurred at the Devil's Gate Dam, deepening its mystery. During the 1950s, several children disappeared within the area. Some were the victims of a serial killer, while the fate of the others remains unknown. Nearby, the Colorado Street Bridge, built in 1913, has been the scene of more than 200 suicides. The paranormal activity reported in the area has been encounters with moving shadows, strange ghostly sounds, sudden attacks of anxiety, orbs, and most recently, UFO sightings. In the research conducted on the Devil's Gate Dam, I found some paranormal groups to advise caution on conducting any investigation at night. My girlfriend at the time and I decided to visit a local historic landmark around September. As it was quiet, we were speaking to the receptionist. The room adjacent to the reception is the start of the tour. There is a water feature in the first room, from which we could also hear the sound of a girl crying. I kept wondering when the family would move on and explore the rest of the place while we were chatting with the receptionist. When we entered this room, there was no family to be found. However, the faint sound of the child could still be heard. I thought it must be a sound effect through the speakers, but I found it an odd choice of effect and out of context. It was not coming from a specific reference point. Fast forward to later on in the tour, when we were in the millkeeper's house, reading the information plaques on the walls and various props, etc. The house is about the size of an average detached 4-bedroom home in the UK. We were down in the cellar with a couple of other people, and there was a door that was unmarked, i.e., no staff-only signs or the like, when suddenly it opened, and what looked like a maid walked in, dressed in 1800s clothing with a Victorian day cap. She walks up the stairs, and we think nothing of it. Maybe they had staff in period dress that day. I can't rightly remember if she had a tray of baked bread rolls or not. We were the last remaining people before we exited the house. I like reading about the history of these places, so it took my time, and got chatting with the lady who sits at the information desk at the front door of the house. We were chatting about various things relating to the house, the era, how these people lived, etc. As we were chatting with her, the same maid came up from the cellar again and continued to the second floor of the house, which is roped off to the public. Oh yeah, I didn't realize this was an event day. What are the staff dressed up for? Is it a special occasion? I commented. She looks confused. What do you mean? She says. We saw a maid down in the cellar, and she came upstairs. We've never seen anyone dressed up here. She's only just come back up there behind you and went up the stairs. What's up there anyway? Why is it roped off? It'd be interesting to see. She grimaces slightly and tilts her head somewhat, with a kind of Donald Trump confused face. It's for staff only, we just use it to store some things, which is pretty mundane up there, but I'm the only staff member posted to this house. There's nobody else here. She went on to assure us it was just her there, no funny business. We learned afterwards that this place has a few reported hauntings and that the crying sound in the first room is not intended. It is indeed paranormal. I realize this is not poltergeist flinging things about scary, but to me, the horror was how normal it all seemed. We just assumed these were all normal events happening. Today I hung out with some of my friends at the park. We were 6 people in total, me, A, E, and our younger brothers. At about 20:45, we decided to leave, so we gathered our things, took our respective brothers, and left. So you understand better, the park is next to the cemetery, so on our way out, me and my friend A saw it and wanted to go explore it once we saw a man park his car in front of the cemetery, get out, and enter. Our other friend, E, wasn't really on board with the idea, but once our brothers heard it, they wanted to go in too. We went to my grandfather's grave as an excuse for why we went in. As we approached the grave, we saw the man from earlier head in the direction of the front gate of the cemetery. We went to the grave, stayed for about 2 minutes, and left. As we were on the path to the front gate, I was holding his hand, E was holding his brother's hand, and my brother and his brother were holding hands. I looked to the right and got very scared. She started claiming she saw the face of a smiling man who looked at her wide-eyed, his face lit by a candle from a nearby grave. It's important to say that his simile was unnaturally wide. I also got scared, and we both started running away until we exited the cemetery. I know it was a stupid idea since you're not supposed to acknowledge any paranormal activity and especially run away, but we got scared and our instincts were stronger than our judgment. E and his brother were calm, they didn't run or anything, and they got out a little later than us. Mine and my brother also ran like us. I brought me some crystals today, and I had them with me in my purse. An important detail is that she gave me 2 pieces of quartz that I did have in my purse the entire time we were in the park. When we got home, one of the 2 pictures was missing. A was the only one who saw the man. She said he was peeking from behind a gravestone and looked at us. At home, me and A started panicking, and we wanted to light candles and candles with incense, but E told us not to. He said ghosts are kept in cemeteries by candles and light, so lighting anything on fire is not a good idea at all because we could be luring something to us. It is now 23:38, and E said that if something actually followed us. I live in Oklahoma, and I'm really into finding abandoned places and exploring them. I found out a few months ago that there is a forgotten graveyard a few minutes away from my house. I've lived in Oklahoma my whole life, and I've never even heard anyone mention this place before. So I looked it up and did more research on it to make sure that I wasn't walking into something crazy or where I could possibly be harmed. I found out that it was the site of an old schoolhouse and that there was no marker, so people had basically just forgotten that it was even there over the years unless they had a loved one that was buried there. I waited until daylight to go just in case, because I wanted to be able to see everything around me since I was in the middle of nowhere. I ended up asking my sister if she wanted to go with me so I wouldn't be alone, and God am I glad that I asked her to come because I never thought I would have seen what I did. We woke up early the next morning to go before it got hot because it was summertime. It was 10 minutes away from where I lived, so it was an easy drive. Finding the exact location was the hard part. Once we found it, we pulled in and got out to start looking around. The grass was all overgrown, and you couldn't really see the headstones anymore. So we had to be super careful walking around because we didn't want to step on anyone. We walked around for an hour or so, and then we stumbled upon this opening where the old schoolhouse used to be. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, it sounded like something or someone was running right at us, but there was no one else around. Mind you, we're in the middle of nowhere, so we stop what we're doing and back up a bit to look and see what was going on. Neither of us spoke easily, so we looked around and saw nothing. We decided it was getting too hot to just stand out there for much longer. We started walking back to the car, and again, it sounded like something or someone was running at us, but faster this time. We both took off, running to the car, and didn't stop until we got in and locked the doors. As we sat there, I looked up more about this place, and it's known by a few people to have major activity, and it's so bad they actually tell you not to go at night. I read stories of people who said they had seen figures walking around or someone asking them for help and then disappearing a few minutes later. I'm glad I decided to wait until daylight and that I asked my sister to come with me, because I don't know what I would have done if I heard someone that I couldn't even see running at me if I was alone. I've never been back to this graveyard. It actually kind of scares me to even think about going back after what happened, even though it wasn't anything serious like some of the stuff other people had said happened to them. Maybe one day I'll have the guts to go back. When I was a kid, my dad and I used to go to the Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. You could walk around and explore the ship, which was always very exciting to me. There had been rumors for years about hauntings on the ship, which eventually led to them hosting a Halloween haunt starting in the early 2000s. This, however, happened in the mid-90s. My dad and I had been walking around down below in what is called Shaft Alley, a series of gangways located down in the boiler room. Each gangway bridges the right and left sides of the ship, providing a single direct path from one end to the other. As you walk across, you can look down and see all of the ship's machinery down below. While we were walking, we noticed a small, stout elderly woman dressed all in white walking towards. The gangway is made of heavy metal grating, so if she had run, we would have heard her footsteps pounding towards the exit. There was no place for her to turn. My dad, who is usually skeptical about ghosts and spirits, is still, to this day, perplexed by what we saw. I was at a farmhouse that had been abandoned since the late 1960s, although it appeared more like a time capsule from the 1920s with the things left inside. This farmhouse was quite literally in the middle of nowhere, nothing but hills and fields, as far as you can see. The inside of the house was fully boarded, so it was pitch black inside. On entering the house, there was an instant feeling of being watched, but maybe that was just because it was so dark, it instantly had that creepy vibe. I had forgotten to grab my torch from the car due to the excitement of finding the house, and so me and my boyfriend were using our phone torches to look around. Once we had scoped the whole building, we decided to start taking some pictures. We were in one of the upstairs bedrooms at this time. As soon as I mentioned taking a picture, we both heard a noise directly behind us, as if a chair had been scraped across the floor. We both looked at each other, thinking the other person had accidentally kicked something, but of course neither of us had. There was a stool in the room at that time, which I then scraped across the floor out of curiosity, and the noise was pretty much the same. Either way, I dismissed this. Old houses do make noises, albeit nothing quite like something scraping across the floor. We continued to go ahead and take some pictures. The first picture my boyfriend went to take was of a photograph, likely of the previous owners. The photo was an old black and white one, you know, the ones where they never smiled, naturally, just to add to the creepy allure. As he went to take the photo, his phone literally shut off. He had never had trouble with his phone prior to this, but it literally shut down at the exact moment he went to take a picture. At this point, I started to panic a little bit, and with my phone now being the only source of light, I thought it best that we leave while he tries to fix his phone. As we stood outside, I felt very unwelcome. I was also panicking as my boyfriend's phone was now not responding to anything, and we didn't have much money at the time, so there was no way we could have afforded a new phone. It was at this point that I decided to talk to any potential spirits that may be around. I explained the circumstance of us not being able to afford a new phone, which is hilarious now that I think about it, and apologized if they felt I had invaded their privacy. I then asked if they could fix the phone. After at least 10 minutes of trying to fix the phone, as soon as I asked them to fix it, the phone immediately came back on. After this, we did decide to go back inside. This time around, being inside felt completely different. I felt almost welcome this time, but only to explore downstairs. When I looked upstairs, I felt sure there was someone looking down at me, almost as if they were sure I would not return upstairs. This could all be a series of very freaky coincidences, or maybe there were previous owners still there who were very protective of their home. This place has become more popular in recent years, and many of the personal items of value in the home have been stolen, so it would explain why they wouldn't welcome visitors. I would be interested to hear your thoughts about this. We were exploring an old social services home. It was a building that housed many people with mental illnesses or developmental disabilities. It's over 50,000 square feet, 3 stories above ground and more below ground. The first thing that happened was when we descended to the first floor, ground level. We walked into what appeared to be a sensory room mixed with an old playroom. It had a table with 5 straps on it for securing a person, and on the wall above it were painted shadows for various tools and items to be hung. I found it rather creepy as far as the setting went. It was destroyed, including what appeared to have been a front desk or secretary desk, but still had a deflated ball pool that appeared to have been full of those plastic ball pit balls. My partner entered the room ahead of me. As I entered a handful of steps behind them, they watched several of the balls suddenly go from stone to rolling relatively quickly towards me. I was not downhill, and there was no discernible breeze. Nothing and no one had been anywhere near them. They rolled across a distance greater than 10 feet to stop at my feet. Continuing on, shortly after this, we descended to the first or second floor below ground, I forget which. We were in a room with CMU walls that was mostly filled with several very large metal cages and some miscellaneous strewn items and papers from classes in the 1960s. As for the huge cages, think floor to ceiling high. I'm not sure what they were for. The room appeared to be a utility or storage room, but it was a very large one with very high ceilings. We looked around for a few minutes, and then suddenly I had a dreadful feeling that something wasn't right. It's hard to explain in a way that holds up to rigorous questioning, to skeptics, or to anyone who wasn't there firsthand to experience it. But my firsthand experience was this: it was a feeling that wasn't anxiety or a case of the creeps from being in such a creepy underground place. The entire vibe of that room shifted shortly after we entered that area. I felt shaky, lightheaded, weak, and very sick to my stomach. I felt like something was very wrong, almost like something was coming for us. I wasn't feeling ill at first, but it set in very quickly. Once I made it back upstairs and outside onto the grounds and in the fresh air, I remained on edge but started physically feeling better. It was really very odd and notable. I'm familiar with participating in paranormal investigations and ghost hunting. I belong to a couple of investigative groups that I actively investigate as a member of the team. My experience indicates to me that there was a very high probability that there was something going on down there. I would like to go back with the equipment and fellow investigators and look into it. I have admittedly been nervous to do so, however, but when the time is right, we will. My hometown is in a rural area, and the place is surrounded by trees. The neighboring houses are quite far from each other, depending on the size of the land. Well, the majority of the homeowners in my hometown renovated their traditional wooden stilted house into a one-story mini bungalow. Well, one day I brought a friend, he's white, back to my hometown. He wanted to experience the whole traditional Asian lifestyle, so he was bummed that my house is brick and mortar, complete with a hot shower, AC, cable TV, Wi-Fi, and we don't eat on the floor. He was staying for the weekend, and on the morning when we were supposed to go back to the city, he went jogging around the village. According to him, he found an abandoned traditional house, so he went in to look around. Typically, most houses in my village don't have fences. And the door was unlocked. He went there and looked around. It was dilapidated, just like an abandoned house should be. Then he tried to go home, but he got lost. Which was very impossible because there was only one paved straight road and the house was just beside the road, and he jogged like 15 minutes from my house. He jogged in the direction of my house, but he could not find it. Then he encountered a mystery man, shirtless, but he was wearing a sarong, and his head was wrapped in a piece of clothing. The man cannot understand English at all, so the man brought him back to his home, and his home was the abandoned house that he just visited, only this time the house looked brand new. He was introduced to the mystery man family by a middle-aged woman who was his wife and a daughter, but the daughter seemed coy and refused to make eye contact with him, and both women were wearing sarongs above their heads. And a little boy that looks like he might be 9 years old, that must be the family's youngest kid. He remembered that he was forced to take off his shoes and wash his feet with water before entering the house. There was a water container made from clay at the stairs, and the scoop was made with coconut shell. There was no furniture, not even a mirror, but the whole floor was covered in woven mats, and the roof was made from leaves. The family served him some food, but the mother and daughter ate in the kitchen, while the man and the boy ate together on the floor in what could be the living room. They don't have a fridge, not even a proper kitchen. The women cooked using firewood. And the food they ate was simple: rice, boiled fish, and some salads. And he was drinking from clay cups, even the plates were roughly made of clay. There was no sign of electricity, not even a plug, a lamp, or light switches. Then the man took him to a well. It's not even a well, it was just a hole in the ground with water in it. But it was deep, and surprisingly, the water was very cool and clean, so he bathed, and the man gave him a sarong instead of a towel. Oh, and the well was surrounded by walls made of leaves, the same leaves that made the roof. After cleaning himself up, he went back to the house, and he saw the man taking a nap on the veranda. He wasn't sure where he should be, so he took a nap on the veranda too. Then he woke up at the same house, only this time the house was in an abandoned state like the first time he saw it. And it was dark, so pitch dark, except for a lamp post shining its light out from the road. So he ran back, and this time, he found my house. He was missing for the whole day. Me and my family gathered for a search party to find him. We even called the police, and some neighbors brought a dog to help find them. The dog actually stopped at this location, 15 minutes away from my house, but there was actually nothing there except for bushes. And he kept on barking there and refusing to move. We are both not sure what really happened. Maybe he went to another dimension, or maybe he fell asleep and had a dream. But he thought it was a surreal experience that he could not forget until now. 9 years later, he went back to his country, and he still brings up this experience every time we meet. This happened tonight. My son's birthday is today. We are all currently quarantined due to being exposed to someone who has COVID. Since we had to cancel our plans, we decided to take a drive. We love just driving around in the country and hiking, and trees can't spread corona. We went to an old church/Masonic lodge. It's now not used at all, in my hometown, famous for a big goat statue mounted on top of the steeple. The statue was a gift from someone in Dundee, Scotland. It's a very old place. No one was around, so my son and I decided to look around. We got to ring this huge brass bell by pulling a rope. My boyfriend and other son were far away from us in the empty parking lot. We left, and they were amazed at how loud the bell was. Anyway, we kept driving and exploring until it got dark. My oldest son said he wanted to stop at the graveyard and then go and ring the bell one more time. It's his birthday, so I said, "As you wish, my darling." We walked the graveyard, paid respect to extremely old graves, and even picked up trash. We always do this when hiking/exploring. Then, just down the road, we went back to the goat church/Masonic lodge. We pulled in, but again, no one was around. This area is very open. The wide yard you walk across to get to the building is clear of trees. The church is right by the busy highway. No sidewalk. Steep stairs. My boyfriend and I decided to stay by the van to smoke a cigarette. I could see the black outlines, of my two boys walking towards the front of the church. It's not super far, but it takes a minute to walk to the building due to the yard being quite mushy and kind of bumpy. Well, suddenly, out of nowhere, there were what looked like 3 more young men or teen boys walking towards my kids and approaching them quickly, as though they knew my kids. Well, my first thought was, okay, I better get over there and make sure these boys ain't up to no good, but I also thought, where the hell did they come from? I immediately walked toward them to make sure all was well. I heard the bell ring. Then suddenly one of the unknown silhouettes charged my oldest son, and as this happened, my boyfriend ran with his knife out, yelling "Hey!" at the people. He ran around the corner to approach the group. I was behind him, but not as fast. As I approached the steps, my boyfriend and my kids were starting to run to the car. There was no one there but my family, and I said, "Where are they?" They just replied, "Go, run, go, Mom, run." I repeated, "Where are those people?" As I ran. They replied, "There are no people. Go." So we skedaddled back to the car. On our way home, we of course talked about this insane experience the whole time. We saw 3 people walk up to my kids, right next to them. It looked almost like they had all planned to meet there. They were walking as a group until one started running toward my son with intent. But my boys never saw them. There was no one there. There is no way they couldn't have noticed them, and there is nowhere for them to hide after. It's all very open there, so there are no hiding spots. The boys also described how, when they reached the steps, it felt like a dream. They got nervous, and they quickly rang the bell before my boyfriend got to them. They both rang the bell. This brass bell is old and loud. It can be heard far and wide. Both boys rang it. I only heard it once. And I saw 3 people disappear. My boyfriend and youngest son felt nervous, negative, and scared the whole way home. My oldest, a birthday boy, and I were excited and felt no malignancy whatsoever. My oldest and I have always loved all things paranormal, but tonight removed that little piece of doubt from the back of my mind. I never thought something like that would happen, not just to me but to my whole family. We prayed for protection on the way home and got home safe and sound. I came upon a house a good 20 minutes outside of my tiny town while looking for fishing spots once. It was a large, 2-story, 4-bedroom farmhouse. It looked like the owners had just gotten up one day and left. All of their belongings were still there. Some dishes are still in the sink. A skillet on the stove. In the closet, I found tons of state fair ribbons dating back to 1912, among other things you'd probably want to keep. The beds were unmade, like someone had just thrown back the covers and gotten up. A bunch of church programs from the church I actually attended when I was a kid, with the name of a pastor I assumed was well before my time. There was an old typewriter on the desk with paper in it with the word "the" typed out. Birdcage with a long dead bird in it. Photographs are still hanging on the wall. The door to the basement was locked, though, and I still sometimes wonder what was down there and why it was locked. Everything was covered in a very thick layer of dust, though. You could see that animals had gotten in and left footprints and droppings everywhere, lots of raccoon prints. It was all just insanely eerie to be there. It was clearly abandoned and had been for quite some time, but I still felt like I was intruding on someone's home. I mean, I've explored tons of places, but this place felt different. So I have been one to love exploring. My friend the day after his birthday tells me of this house that's abandoned nearby where he lives. Me, being one to love this sort of thing, wants to go, as everything on the outside seems fine and nothing has gone wrong so far. The two of us explore around it, seeing a shed that's just a mess of stuff, and things are all over the place. So far, nothing wrong. As we approach the main house itself, most things are boarded off except a broken glass door in the back. The strange thing is that the closer I got to the inside, the harder it was to move at all. I managed to get to the doorway itself, but I felt like claws were ripping at my heart and chest, preventing my body from moving inside the house itself. No matter how much I wanted to, I just could not get inside. All I could do was move back. Was this something that was just my thing, or is it something others have experienced and can shed some light on? I'm a big urbex, urban explorer, which is someone who explores abandoned buildings, caves, and tunnels. I also do a bit of graffiti art. This is a big passion of mine, and I love it every day. So we recently went to a cave called Tot. We were doing our usual looking around, getting a tour of the cave from one of the people who are usuals in that cave, taking pictures, and looking for a place to chill. Keep in mind that there are many small tunes and split-offs to get lost in, and a couple kids actually started a fire to keep warm because they got lost. If you know anything about fire, it sucks in oxygen and makes carbon emissions, so they died from the oxygen, so the cave is presumed to be haunted by them. But there haven't been any reports of the hauntings in a couple years. So once we got to the spot we were going to chill at, we noticed that we had to climb a 40-foot vertical incline with sandstone carved into it to put your feet. Once you are at the top, it's pitch black unless you shine a flashlight in that direction. Where things start to get creepy is when the new people start to shine their flashlights at this big hole next to the top of the chill spot. They start asking me if I saw that or heard that. In my head, I start getting paranoid about the situation, so when we all start to get scared and creeped out, we walk out, so nobody passes out or has a panic attack. When we are about to leave, the older, more experienced cave dweller is last out to make sure nobody is left behind. He was about to walk up to the entrance, but he kept tripping over nothing, then started to cry. Just a side note, this guy is a big guy that never cries at all. He was just bawling his eyes out from getting paranoid, so I talked him out, and he just went slow, and within a couple minutes we were back by our cars. Our friend has stopped crying by now but has started to talk about how much his back hurts. So I told him to take off his shirt so I could make sure he wasn't bleeding or anything, and that was when I looked at his back and realized something wasn't right. He had huge scratch marks across his back, like he had been scratched by a hand. His ankles had them too, so I thought that's when he kept tripping, but I realized that he was the last one out and nobody was behind. So now that cave is extremely dangerous, and people get the chills and have the same problem when they start to leave. That's the end of the time that I was most scared in a cave. I was hiking through the Dolomites in the Italian Alps. It was the last week of September, and the tourist season was coming to a close. I finished my 4th day of hiking with a beer at an empty hotel. The staff were focused on closing but nice enough to recommend a place I could pitch my tent, an abandoned hotel about 2 kilometers down the mountain pass, no camping in most of the Dolomites. I zigzagged down the road to a clearly abandoned building that was once a modest chalet on a nice plot of flattish ground. The air was getting cold and thick with fog. Before dark set in, I couldn't resist exploring, easily crawling through a broken window into a rotting bar, still with plastic Christmas and New Year decorations. The place was pretty ruined, with standard graffiti and vandalism on the main floor, but in the basement, I found a painting by a child in a plastic frame. Symmetrical ellipses of all colors met along the center of the page in a football shape. Maybe the kid was thinking of a rainbow over a calm lake, but it looked like a colorful eye. I stepped into the main hall and heard running water from one of the rooms. Shit, someone's here? How have they not shut off water to this place? I had to make a decision, and curiosity overcame fear. The room was dark, and I could tell water was pouring onto the ground just inside. Headlamp on, I now swung the door open onto a busted well/sump system, spraying the walls from a broken pipe before the water poured into the ground. Sometimes nothing, or nobody, is worse than something. I walked back up the pass, and through the fog, I saw a bonfire beside the now closed hotel, still off in the distance. It was reassuring until I came upon ashes of paperwork and no people. When I was a kid, about roughly 9, I'm 20 now, I used to sneak out at night and walk through my neighborhood. I was a weird kid. I used to watch so much scary stuff on YouTube that I would spend my nights literally shaking out of fear, but I still did it. My neighborhood is full of abandoned houses that were mostly left untouched after the war in 1995. I am from Bosnia. I always wanted to explore them as a kid but never could, as I was a shy kid. That meant someone seeing me explore and giving me a weird look would make me run. I don't know why I was like this, but that's not important now. There was this huge house that was always surrounded by big grass that was taller than me. My wish was to explore it. I had asked my mom a bunch of times to go with me, but she obviously declined and prevented me from going. One night, I grabbed my dad's flashlight from the closet, climbed through the window of my room, and went to the house. It was 12 a.m. I arrived quickly, as it was a few houses from mine. Seeing no cars, I ran through the tall grass and ended up seeing a boarded up window. There was a tight gap, and I managed to crawl through it. I entered the house, and to my surprise, the room I was in had literally nothing in it, not even a beer bottle or a cigarette. The house had neither real windows nor doors, so I could hear the hissing sound of the wind. I walked around for a bit, and I realized there was nothing really special about it and that I probably should have stayed in bed. While I was walking, I could swear I heard someone walking. Like walking in heavy boots on stone. I froze, thinking there was someone in the house with me. I stood frozen for 5 minutes, and when I could no longer hear the sound, I continued to the second floor. The first room I saw on the second floor was the bathroom. It had a toilet broken in half and a bathtub filled with dirty water. On the floor of it, I spotted something metal. We will talk about that metal thing later. I continue walking and see an attic. Like a hole in the roof of the house leading somewhere, there was a ladder nearby, and as I went to get it, I saw something small, like really small, like a lighter sprinting across the room. I stood there and, as a kid, of course, started crying. I can't really explain what I saw. It didn't look like a bug or a rat. More like a small humanoid creature. Anyway, as I started crying, I sprinted to the window that I came in through. Looking behind me, I could make out a silhouette. Like a man holding something. I jumped for the gap, and while trying to get out, I heard a huge bang. Like from a gunshot or something. It gives me chills to this day. Sprinting to my house, I went back in through the window and went to bed. I couldn't sleep for nights after that. My mother eventually took me to a doctor. They said nothing was wrong with me. A few years later, I decided to bring up this story to my mom. She laughed at me but told me something that sent chills down my spine. So the story goes that in the war between Serbs and Bosniaks, that house was used by the Serbs as a slaughterhouse. It is estimated that over 200 Bosniaks were killed in that house. When my mom told me that, I went to my room and cried for days. So this story takes place around the time of the housing crisis, back in 2008 or so. I was in high school at the time. A buddy, whom I'll call Eric, and myself would do some urban exploring by sneaking into empty, abandoned or foreclosed homes. Of course, we do these explorations in the dead of night to avoid any trouble with the law. I can't give away the location because people now live there. And I have no scientific, rational explanation for what happened, but I know what I saw and heard, so I'd like to share it with you all. So we set out around 12 a.m., just like we would any night, and after about an hour or so, we found a house that I often saw on my walks to school. As we walk up to the house, we scan for anyone, then we make our way down the large driveway that leads into the backyard of the house. The first thing I noticed was how tall the grass was, like it hadn't been mowed in quite some time, months, I'd say. Then I noticed a smaller house further away, near the back of the property. We told ourselves we'd check that house out once we'd explored the bigger one. We entered the bigger house through the door that leads into the garage, and from the garage, we stepped into the kitchen. Believe it or not, the doors were unlocked. When we enter the kitchen, we see the house is almost pitch black. We can only see a few feet ahead thanks to the street lights, so I use my only light source at the time, a cheap flip phone with the screen brightness on max. We start our exploration down the hallway and check out each room, 5 in total, counting the 2 living rooms. Eric is close behind me as we make our way through each room and eventually back to the kitchen. Once in the kitchen, we chat about how nice the house is and its size given the area it's in, which is much bigger than the surrounding houses. As we're talking, I notice a metal decoration hanging above the kitchen doorway. It almost looked like some sort of decorative shield. I pull it from its spot and inspect it closely. Once done, I can't figure out how to put it back, so I set it between my feet on the tile floor. I take a look at my friend and take a step into the kitchen, and then we both hear what sounds like something sliding along the floor and then a bang at the end of the hall. Eric and I both freeze and stare at one another through the streetlight shining through the kitchen window. Eric whispers to me, "Is there someone here with us? Did someone follow us in?" I honestly didn't know, but after a minute or two, we decided to walk down the hall and see what the noise was. As my phone light creeps to the end of the wall, we see the shield I had just pulled down. We were both relieved, and I thought, well, maybe I kicked it when I stepped and didn't notice. I picked it up, and this time I figured out how it needed to be attached to its original position. Once again, I look at Eric, take a step towards him, and hear a few clangs on the floor, that familiar sliding sound across the floor, and the bang against the wall. Now we're really scared and frozen, not moving for what seemed like forever. Then an even louder bang is heard at the other end of the house, and we both jump and stare into the dark hallway. Then again, bang, and then quiet, then 3 rapid bangs. Someone was thrashing around in the very last room in the house, and we didn't know what the duck to do. Determined not to let this person scare us, we run towards that last room and confront this asshole. When we get there, nothing, no one. The room was empty, but how? Who? We were sure it was coming from this room. There's no way whoever it was slipped by us. The room had a sliding glass door leading into the backyard, but it was locked from the inside. Then, before we can gather our thoughts and ask each other what is happening, bang bang, this time from the kitchen. Scared out of my ducking mind, we both agree it's time to leave. We make our way through the back door in the room and finally to the street, all while checking over our shoulders to ensure no one is going to come running out of the house after us. No one came, and the neighborhood was quiet. Eric and I start our walk home, talking about the house, when Eric notices his pocket knife is missing. He then turns his pockets inside out to show me he isn't joking. We stop, and he keeps telling me we have to go back for it since it's his favorite one. Frustrated, I asked him, how did you lose it if it's your favorite knife? He assured me he never removed it from his pocket and had no idea how it could have been removed from his pocket. I agree to go with him and find it. We make it halfway up the street when Eric tells me his back feels like it's on fire. I can see it really bothering him because of the expression of pain on his face. He asks me to lift his shirt and look at what could be causing the burning sensation. I lift his shirt and quickly notice 3 very large scratches, starting from his right shoulder blade going all the way down to his left hip, then from his left hip across to his right hip. I tell him this, and he immediately says the house is haunted, but he still wants to get the knife. I'm scared, but I'm not going to let him go alone. So, we make our way back into the house and immediately hear that banging noise, but we made a pact with each other that we would not run no matter what happened. We begin our search for the knife, looking high and low, all while hearing banging, and now things are being thrown across the room. Of course, I'm ducking scared shitless and want to leave. But we haven't found the knife yet. We do one pass through the entire house and end up in the kitchen. In the kitchen, there is an entrance to the second living room that you can see from the backyard. In that room, there is one piece of furniture, a hutch. Now we've already checked this room since it's near our point of entrance and found nothing. But we decided one more pass through the room would not hurt. I make my way into the dark room and let my light lead me to the hutch, and there it is. On the hutch, we found the knife, but for ducking sure, we checked this room and the hutch. He didn't hesitate for a moment, he grabbed the knife, and we hightailed it out through the garage and back onto the street. We make our way to our homes, but the entire week we talk about the house and what is going on there. We brushed it off and didn't believe it. There had to be some explanation, so we went back. But we brought 3 friends with us because they wanted to see this haunted house, which Eric and I wouldn't shut up about. While walking through the backyard, I can't explain it, but for some reason I wanted to get a closer look at the back house. I start making my way towards the house, but I start to feel scared. A feeling of dread came out of nowhere. I turn away from the house and start my way back to the group, but at the corner of my eye, I see something leaping from the bushes. Some dark figure leapt from the bushes and into the tall grass, but when I gave it my full attention, it was gone. I stared at the bushes for a moment, a little confused, but I brushed it off. I did mention it to the group when I caught up with them, but it was quick. Glass door to the backyard, and 4 of us start making our way through the backyard. I turn around to wait for Eric. He was not moving, he was caught in a daze, standing in front of an unhinged door that was propped against the wall for support. Eric was staring down the hallway as if waiting for something. I had to call his name 3 times before he realized we were leaving. He stepped forward, and before my eyes, it looked as though someone tried to throw the unhinged door on top of him. Eric jumped out of the way and started towards me, scared out of his wits. The other 3 are already almost to the street, so we both just keep the pace and catch up with them. As soon as we reached the street, one of the friends kept telling us how messed up that house was. You can see the look of terror on his face as he expressed his feelings about the place. He then mentions a burning feeling going up his calf. Sure enough, he's got those ducking scratches starting from his ankle and stopping midway through his calf. Just before we split up to go home, The three of them swore off that place. And that was the last time those three friends spoke to us. And that's it, that's everything I can remember. Eric moved not long after that, and I moved away at the end of 2009. I haven't seen the house since, except when I tell the story to friends. I'll pull up the house on Google Images. I visit Eric from time to time, and we always talk about what happens there.